Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I am bringing you my best and worst / most disappointing books of 2022. So I'm doing this as one video this year. I don't actually have a lot. I have 7 books on my worst and I have 13 books on my best. I'm not going to dwell on the worst, most disappointing ones too much, but I do feel like I personally like to see other people's worst books because, for example, I saw a book that was on about 5-6 people's worst books of 2022 and I have just finished it yesterday and it was a 5-star for me. So I'm always curious to see other people's worst. However, I'm doing this in one video, but if you do not want to see my worst, I will leave chapters along the bottom so that you can skip ahead to just watch the best, because I know not everyone likes watching worst videos, like worst books videos, which is completely fair. Like, you do you. So I thought I would just like make it easy for you so you can see where you need to skip to, because I'm going to start with the bad and then go on to the good. I actually only own one of these physically still, the worst books, and it's because it's the 5th book in a series. I'm going to start with this one because this wasn't a worst book. This was a 4-star for me. However, I was very disappointed, and that is The Sea Witch by Katie Robert. Now, this is the 5th book in a 6-book series, the Wicked Villains series, and I genuinely thought this would be my favourite because it follows Ursa, who is essentially Ursula. And if you know anything about me, Ursula is one of my favourite Disney villains. So I was very excited for this and I was just very disappointed. Like I said, it was a 4-star. I still enjoyed it, but it was my least favourite of the series when I thought it was going to be my favourite. I just couldn't connect well enough with the actual story, and I don't think the smut was as good in this. I think it was partly because there was more plot than porn in this, which for a Katie Robert book, that's not what I want. But when we did get... But the smut just didn't read as well as the other smut in the other books in this series. And I feel like the balance wasn't there. But anyway, I still enjoyed it overall. I just was disappointed and didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Okay, we're going to go for one next that I actually DNF'd. And that is The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Danan. I'm really sad about this one because this is the sequel to The Roommate, which was a 5-star for me, but I DNF'd this about 56% through, so it was a bit over halfway. 56% through, I DNF'd. I could not at all get like into the characters. And I don't actually think... So at first I thought it might have been the fact that the male love interest is a rabbi. So there is a lot of like religious talk. So at first I thought it might be that. But then I realised it's not that. That wasn't actually bothering me as much as I thought it would. It was just I was rooting for the characters, but I didn't care for them at all, which Naomi... I loved her character in The Roommate. Like, yes, she was a side character in The Roommate, but I loved her character and I was really excited to get her story, and this just wasn't it. And I'm not the only one who thought that, so at least I'm not alone in it, but I am really sad that that's how we feel about it. I actually lied. This next one I do own the physical copy of, but it is somewhere on a shelf where I can't get to, and that is The Initiation by L.J. Smith. This is the 1st book in the Secret Circle series. Now, I'm not going to be too hard on this because I'm trying to remind myself that this was like classic, like 90s, early 2000s YA supernatural. And I'm trying to remind myself of that. And I'm also trying to remind myself that it's not the TV show. It's not the TV show. Because this right here is the reason I don't watch TV shows or films before reading the book, because I watched a TV show for this, which I'm still bitter that they cancelled after 1 season because it was a good show. And yeah, I couldn't get into this. I am going to continue the series just because it's 3 books. They're very short books. And Liv went out of her way to get me the covers that she did. And I want to at least attempt to read the other 2. But yeah, so I was disappointed in this. I think it was a 3-star, which isn't a bad rating. I wouldn't say it's a worst book. It's just very much a disappointing. A lot of these are more disappointing reads than worst. I'm going to get to the worst, don't worry. There is some here. Next up is another disappointing one, and it is The Passion of Hades by Eliza Reign and Rose Wilson. I don't know what the series is called for this, but the first book is The Power of Hades, and I absolutely adored that book. So when I decided to continue the series, I was like, amazing, I'm ready for this. Give me more. And it just didn't seem to be going anywhere. So in the first book, Percy has to complete these trials because she's got to marry Hades. The trials still went on through the entirety of this book. Like, I understood the trials weren't over in the first book. The first book was very short and it was setting up the story. And then she had a few of the trials. And then this one was going to be the rest of the trials. And then we'd get into more of the, like, after the trials. No, this entire book was trials. And it still isn't over. There's still more trials. And I just feel like the pacing is so off on this. And I'm not going to be continuing the series anymore because the pacing has put me off so much that I actually don't care what happens. Which is a shame because this book is like my thing right now. And I was just very disappointed. Next up, we have a pretty unpopular opinion, and that's Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this. I only read this because I wanted to read the 3rd series in the Elderling series, Elderling World rather. And to do that, I had to finish. Now, I hated Assassin's Apprentice. If you recall last year, or the year before rather, it was a 2-star for me. I hated it. But then I was like, do you know what? I need to, if I want to continue the series past the Live Ship, because I loved the Live Ship trilogy, then I need to finish this trilogy. Otherwise, I'm not going to know what's going on because it follows the same characters. It follows Fitz. So I thought, do you know what? They're on script. I'm just going to listen to them and I'm going to get through them. The second one was a 3-star. I liked it a little bit more. I still didn't care about the characters much. But then this one was back to being a 2-star and I was just so bored. There was an emotional moment in one of these books that is something that in any other book series would rip my heart out and I'd be in like floods of tears. Yeah, no, I was just sat there like, cool, okay. Next. Like, I didn't care. I didn't care at all. So yeah, this. I have since, read the trilogy that follows on and really enjoyed it. They were all 4 stars. But this remains on my worst. I'm going to call this a worst, not a most disappointing, because I knew I wasn't going to love this. But I was trying to power through. So I feel like this is a bit of a cop-out, this one, because I don't think it's very fair, because it's a very unpopular opinion. Everyone else I know loves this first trilogy, but I didn't. So yeah. Next up is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. Now, I read this when I was still into fantasy, like a heavy fantasy, and I hated this book because, like, the way, oh my God, the way people are treated in this book. Oh my God, I cannot deal with it. Like, I genuinely hated this book and I was rage reading, which is hilarious because it's called Rage of Dragons. But even the story was not good. It sounded great when you read the blurb, but when you read the actual book, it is so bad. If you love this book, I'm sorry, but it's a no from me. And then this, I'm going to class this as worst and most disappointing because I was disappointed because this was a series ender for a series that was like a 4-5-star series, and this was leading up to being a 5-star book, and something happens quite near the end that just ruined everything, and I hate the author for this. It's also a worst book because there was literally no need for the author to put the trope in that she did. There was literally no need for it, and I hate what she did to this story because it was unnecessary and it ruined the entire book. So this is, I feel like I'm getting really angry already because I'm so angry at this book, and it's Last Sacrifice by Rochelle Mead. It's the final book in the Vampire Academy series, and Like, if you recall back in February 2022, and I read the second book, Frostbite, and I had this whole section of my vlog, I couldn't breathe properly because I was crying so much because that book broke me. I now don't think it would break me again if I was to ever reread it. I'm not gonna reread it. I'm done with it. I unhauled that series. But yeah, I was so angry and disappointed. Like, I had spent like 6 months reading these books, one a month, for her to do what she did, and it was just unnecessary. And it wasn't even so much the fact it happened, it was the fact that the characters tried to make excuses and then make another person out to be at fault for their actions. And it was just, I will go into spoilers if I carry on talking about it, so we're going to end it there because I can't physically talk about this book without just wanting to rage and throw stuff. So this book was the worst book I have ever read in my life. Okay, they were my worst. Now let's do some happy. You're going to see the other scale, like the other side of me now, because I'm going to be so happy talking about these books. So the way I've done my best for this year. Now, in previous years, I've just looked at all of my books that I've read and picked the top ones that aren't rereads. I did it a little bit differently in 2022. So these might not necessarily be the actual top 12 or 13 books. However, I picked one book from each month. Each month I had a favourite book, and then I've ordered those 12, 13. One month had 2 books because I literally could not choose between them. But apart from that, every other month had one book. So we'll go for the honourable mention number 13 first. And that was Barbarian Lover by Ruby Dixon. Yes, you are seeing right. A blue alien smut book hit my favourites of the year. This book was so good. This has some serious discussions in it as well as just the smut. Like, the first 2 books were a lot more less plot. This one actually has plot, and I loved Kira. Kira and Ahiko are like everything. I will say this is not my favourite in the series. I've read the first 5. The 5th one is my favourite. However, the 5th one did not make my favourites of the year, because I read a book I loved more in the month that I read that. So it didn't make my favourites of the year. But this and book 5, they're so good. And then in number 12, we have The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This book was incredible. I read this back in April, I want to say, and it threw me so much that I was like, I want to read the next book now, but I'm scared to. And I put off reading it. Like, I put off reading the next book in this series until December. Am I glad I read it in December? Yes, but that is besides the point. This book was just everything, and I'm really loving the direction this series is going, and I just loved everything about it. The characters are just great, and one of the main things that people hate about the main character in this is that she asks so many questions. But do you know what? That's one of the things that makes me love her, because it's such a realistic thing in a fantasy romance that's got all these creatures and magic and everything. The main character is like being thrust into this world, and she has questions which make sense. Like, I would have questions. I would be like, what's this? What's this? What's this? I don't know what that means. What does that mean? I would be constantly asking questions. So I don't know why people hate the main character for that, because that is the main criticism I see people give the main character. And I just don't understand why. Like, I can understand you not liking a character, fair. But the reason just, it baffles me that that's some people's reason. But anyway, I loved this book. It's in my top of the year, and I'm very happy with that. Next up is, so this is Ever After by F.T. Lukens. I read this in, I want to say October. I think it was October. It was October. And I absolutely adored this. This author writes such good, like, found family, and this one is found family, and the dynamics between the friendship group is just so perfect, and the romance and the story and just everything about this book is incredible. And it probably would have been higher up if there weren't other books which you will see shortly, but it was a pretty high 5-star for this one. I loved this book and I highly recommend F.T. Lucan's books. So far I have read In Deeper Waters and this, but they do have other books which I think are more sci-fi than fantasy, so I'm willing to give them a go, but I don't know if I'll love them as much. But they do have another fantasy coming out, I think in April, which I will be getting and I will be reading. Next up at number 10, we have The Beast by Katee Robert. Yes, of course there was going to be a Katee Robert book on this list. This is my favourite book in the Wicked Villains series and it did not disappoint. It threw me that my favourite book was the Gaston one. But here we are. I loved how, like, the dynamics of it's a throuple in this because it is Isabel, Beast and Gayton. And honestly, the way the relationship works is just so well written. And like the build up to them sorting out their issues was just, I loved this. I did a whole vlog on this, which I'll leave here wherever it goes. I did an entire vlog on this series. It is spoilery. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I do warn before I'm going to say spoilers, so you can watch it if you haven't. But yeah, I talk a lot more about all of the books in this series because I did a vlog for it, which I released whilst I was in Disney. I felt a bit weird about that, but oh well. Next up at number 9, we have All the Feels by Olivia Dade. This is the one that drew with So This Is Ever After. I love this. I loved the first book. Spoiler alert. That's not me saying spoiler alert. That is the name of the book. The first book in the series. I loved that book. I loved the fan fiction aspect because the main character of that one writes fan fiction and there is a lot of like talk of fan fiction and everything. And in this one, we see Alex diving into the world of fan fiction and it's not as heavy on the fan fiction, but there's also like, I just love this. And Alex is one of my favourite characters from books ever. Like, I love him. He's just so lovable. And there are things about him that remind me of me. Although I don't think I'm lovable. So work that one out. I feel like there are traits that are lovable on other people, but not me. But that's just me being self-deprecating. So yeah. But yeah, I absolutely loved this. I am hooked on this series. It's incredible. You'll fall in love with the characters. You'll fall in love with their stories and their love stories. And they are everything. Next up at number 8 was my first one of the year. My first favourite of the year last year. And that is Kate in Waiting by Becky Albertalli. This book is every theatre kid's, like, heart. Because whilst the theatre wasn't really a main thing, it was like a love story type thing. However, it was also a journey of discovery for the main characters, and you got to see them like putting on a school production, and it was just a fun time. Honestly, there were scenes where they were talking about like being backstage in school, in their school hall, and I was just like, oh my god, this is reminding me of, like, it was nostalgic. It was a nostalgic feeling. It was reminding me of when I used to do my school shows and I would be backstage, and it was just, oh, my heart was bursting with love reading this. Like, Becky Albertalli is just, oh, I love her as a writer. I know some people don't like her writing. Fair. I am not one of those people. I love them. In at number 7 is actually a non-fiction, and it is Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. This book was so heartwarming. Now, I've said on my channel plenty of times, I don't do Harry Potter. I did once, like most of us. I don't anymore for obvious reasons. However, this is not Harry Potter. This is Tom Felton. I've always been a fan of Tom Felton. Like, he has always been my favourite. I met him a few years ago and he is the loveliest person. And I just was so interested to hear about his life. And one thing I love is that, yes, he talks a lot about being on the sets of Harry Potter, but he talks more about his relationships with the other actors and actresses that he worked with on there. And especially him talking about Alan Rickman was just, my heart, oh, I was sobbing. But just the way he tells the story of his life, was just so heartwarming and at parts heartbreaking, because I learned things about his life that are a more recent thing that I did not think happened. And it was really interesting to see into his life. And I don't read many autobiographies. Like, I have a select few there from people that I find interesting, but he is definitely one of them. Next up at number 6, you're going to see this book held up 3 times because it's a bind up. We have, let's hide the other books. We have Stuck With You by Ali Hazelwood. This is the second book in the STEMinist novellas. I really enjoyed this one. It was my least favourite of the 3, mostly because I am petty and the main character makes a comment about the Star Wars prequels and it really didn't sit right with me. And I was like, I'm docking you a point because I don't like you for that. So yeah, that is the only reason that is my least favourite of the 3. I know I'm being petty, but I don't care. Next in number 5 is Something Is Killing the Children Volume 2. This series is bloody incredible. Pun intended with the bloody. I have never been this engrossed in a comic or graphic novel series ever. But this one, like, there are monsters. It has, like, I said in either my vlog or my wrap up, whilst this is nothing like Stranger Things, it gives me the same sort of monstery vibes as Stranger Things series 2 does. And I'm here for it. I love it. And I'm really excited to continue this. There's going to be 6 volumes altogether and I've only read the first 2. I will be getting the rest because I need to read them. But I loved this and it's definitely a favourite series for me now. Next up, of course, it's going to come to no surprise that this is on my my favourites of the year. It's House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. This book broke me in the best possible way. I cannot get over how much I loved this book. Whilst I absolutely loved the first book in this series, there were some things missing for me. Not just the smart. That was one of the things, but it wasn't just that. But this one ticked all the boxes for me and more, because there were twists and turns in this that I did not see coming, and I was just in awe of this entire story, especially the last few chapters, which blew my little mind. And it would have been higher up if it weren't for the books you're gonna see in spots 3, 2 and 1, which, if you know me, you probably know what they are. But if you don't, in number 3 we have Below Zero by Ali Hazelwood, which is the 3rd book in the STEMinist novellas trilogy. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed it more than Stuck With You. The character didn't make bad comments about Star Wars prequels, but it was not my favourite. I feel like a part of the story just felt a little bit far-fetched, which is why it's not my favourite. But I absolutely adored the characters. I love them so much. And it was just so cute. And I loved it. And then, I know what you're probably thinking. Which Ali Hazelwood is going to be in number 1 and which is going to be on number 2? Obviously, it's not going to be The Love Hypothesis, because I read that for the first time in 2021. But there were 2 other books. And in second place, drumroll please, is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. It did not hit the number 1 spot, which is a giveaway for what did hit the number 1 spot. But I love this book. I love Bea. I love Levi. I love their journey. It's funny. There is a cat. There's 2 cats in this book, which is even better. Levi is essentially Adam Driver again, and I'm a-okay with that because Adam Driver. But I just love their differences, but also their similarities. And I love how Bea is constantly like interrupting him when he's trying to say something. And it's like, Bea, if you just let him speak. Let the man speak, but she doesn't. But that's what makes this story great. I know a lot of people hated that. I am not one of those people, but love on the brain. I've read this 3 times last year, 2022. And I will probably read it multiple times this year as well, because I am trash for Ali Hazelwood. Which means in the number 1 spot for my favourite book of 2022, it is Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood. Now, I love Adam Carlson. Adam Carlson is my favourite Ali Hazelwood character. I love Levi, but Liam. This also has the roommates and false proximity trope, and I just absolutely love how much they hate each other, but they have to live together, and it's just glorious. And everything about this just makes me so happy. I've read it twice in 2022. This was one that I read or reread on the plane to Florida, and I had a good time with it. Did I have to angle my iPad on certain parts? Yes, I did. We're not going to talk about that. But I loved this, and I am really glad I have physical copy of all 3 of these now, because obviously I read them on ebook and audiobook when they came out before individually. But now that Bind Up is out, it literally arrived last week, and I'm so happy. Okay, so that was my best books of 2022. If you're still here, well done, because I think this is a long one. That's what she said. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite and least favourite books of 2022 was. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye.